Hi all. Thought I'd share something interesting that happened to me about 15 years ago. Most won't believe me, but for what it's worth, I promise everything I tell you is 100% true and how it happened to the best of my memory. However, the names have been changed for privacy reasons. I was about 18, and I was hanging out at my friend Joanne's house with some other friends from school. I can't quite remember how we got onto the subject, but towards the end of the evening, Joanne thought it would be fun to perform a seance. Joanne and her family were from Cape Town, South Africa, and they had a deep-rooted interest in the spiritual realm, or at least that's what Joanne made out to us. With the lights off and the candles lit, we all sat at a round table, with cards fanned out around the edge. Each card had a letter of the alphabet arranged A to Z, and a shot glass placed in the middle. Joanne started speaking out to the spirits in Afrikaans. I remember pulling a face and rolling my eyes. At the time, I was an insufferable, enlightening, atheist teen dork. You know the type. Cringy 4chan edgelord who thinks any form of spirituality or religion is beneath me and my superior intellect. I never wore a fedora, but I was damn close. However, what was about to happen to me made me question everything. It started mundane enough. A few questions were asked, and the shot glass we were resting our fingers on started to move to and fro, until eventually one of my friends asked the spirit if they were associated with anyone in the room. The shot glass moved directly towards me. Incredulously, I asked the spirit, "If you're associated with me, then what's my mother's maiden name?" My eyes fixate on the letters that spell out her maiden name, Jones, Jones, but the glass started spelling out something different. First the glass went to T, then H, then O. I thought then it was bullshit as it was completely wrong. Then I was struck by a horrifying realization. When my mom was 6 months old, her biological father died of a heart attack, and a year after that, she took her stepfather's name. I completely forgot about this in a moment, as I was expecting the glass to read out the maiden name she had majority of her life, but it was actually spelling out her original maiden name of Thompson. It was a fact so trivial that I barely remembered it myself. It was something never talked about even within my family as it happened so long ago. It would be so hard to believe that any of my friends would know this esoteric piece of my family's history that occurred 20 years before I was even born. But nevertheless, somehow it was being spelled out in front of my very own eyes. Thompson. My school friends and I wouldn't talk about anything deeper than video games and tits at this age. Yet there's no way I ever mentioned this to any of them. It's not like one of my pot-smoking loser friends had a copy of my mom's birth certificate, and none of them had ever met anyone else in my family. There is literally no way anyone could have known this. Before I could contemplate this for too long, or ask any other questions to my ghostly associate, Joanne's mom comes into the room and turns on the lights, and with a thick SA accent shouts something like, "Bloody hell, Joanne, stop messing around with this silly crap," and put a definitive stop to the proceedings. Of course, at the time, I played it off as a prank, but the more I think of it, the more my mind wonders. Did something actually paranormal happen that night? I know it's nothing dramatic or exciting. I didn't see an apparition or a cryptid, but unlike 90% of the shit you read on Reddit, this experience is actually true and something to this day I can't explain. I love to hear your thoughts. Like many of you, it's only in hindsight that as we grow older that you begin to consider just how funky, bizarre, reckless, and wild some of the stuff we've experienced as kids actually was. I sense that this is twofold. One, the obvious, we were kids. And as kids, we both simultaneously clueless, but also somehow uniquely attuned to otherworldly things. Two, It is only through learning and growing older that you can put things in perspective. Along these lines, I have lately been thinking about something my best friend and I, Christy, experienced as kids. This isn't a ghost holy crap story. For me and for her, the creepiness of this experience is more entrenched in our recognition as adults that we had no idea who or what we were playing with as kids. Anyway, here's my story. My grandmother lived on the same street as me and my family did growing up. She was in her 80s, loving, kind, and genuine. Just everything a grandmother could be. In addition, on the same street, I lived a few houses down away from my best friend to this day, Christy. As kids, we had a typical childhood. We played fort, store, built snowmen, rode our bikes, blah blah blah, kid stuff. Around 9 or 10 years old, we stumbled into my grandmother's basement. It was full of cool stuff, antique furniture, appliances, random art, tools, etc., etc. We found this stuff fascinating, but most of it was hands-off as it belonged to my grandmother and family that had passed. In addition to these heirlooms, we also stumbled upon a Ouija board, a super old one. I would say most likely one of the oldest ones that existed at that time in the 1980s. It was made of wood, and it had a hard plastic viewfinder letter thingy. If I were to guess, it was perhaps from the 1920s, 1930s, who knows? Regardless, it was damn old. For us kids, we felt that we'd hit gold. We didn't even know what a Ouija was. When we asked my grandmother what to do with it, she laughed and told us we could talk with ghosts. Moreover, when we asked our parents about it, they jokingly described it in the same way. We can connect with the other side, with dead people. In retrospect, it blows my mind that neither my grandmother nor our parents cautioned us against playing with such a toy. Weirdly for us, as kids, this was all fun and games, and even more weirdly, it was treated as such by the adults around us. I also think for them, it was also a welcome distraction to keep us occupied. Regardless, my friend Christy and I started playing with the Ouija more and more over time. And from the start, it seemed to want to play as well. Usually this was in the form of complete randomness. You name it, and we talked about it with this board. Oftentimes, we would seemingly connect with spirits or beings on the other side. During these exchanges, we asked questions. For example, who were we talking to? Where were they? About the lives of these spirits, if they could see us, what they thought of us, what they thought of our world, etc., etc. To this day, both Chrissy and I are adamant that we never moved the planchette associated with the board. Indeed, I can say with complete honesty I never moved the planchette one way or the other. Moreover, we really never needed to, as whatever or whoever we were communicating with was fully engaged, and communication, or whatever it was, flowed freely and readily. Over the months, we would come back to it, both out of childhood boredom, but curiosity. I distinctively remember that oftentimes the spirits we communicated with had old-sounding names: Evelyn, Henry, Louise, Elijah, etc. Moreover, I also remember that over time, things began to get darker. I readily remember a number of times, for example, that these entities would tell us that they were in hell. We didn't share any of this with our parents. Remember, for us, it was just fun and games. However, we did have communication late one afternoon that continues to haunt the both of us to this day. That afternoon, we asked to connect with Carl, one of the many that we ended up communicating with over time. Carl was one of the entities that said they were in hell. He was also one of the spirits that was readily engaged in the question and answer games that we would explore with him and the board. So that afternoon, during our chats with Carl, things took a weird turn. Out of the blue, Carl told us, but in a very clear way, that he planned on visiting the both of us that night while we were asleep. We reacted to Carl just as we did with all the other spirits we connected with. We thought it was funny, weird, and wild. Once again, we were stupid kids. We put the board away and went home to our families. That night, the night that Carl said he was going to visit, I experienced nothing. I slept fine. I am one of 4 boys. Myself and my little brother sleep in one room. Matt and Jason, my other brothers, in another, and my parents in another. I woke up the following morning as I normally did, nothing out of the ordinary, and I went to school. That following afternoon, I reconnected with Christy. I asked her about Crazy Carl's story, that one where he had come to visit us. I relayed to her that I experienced nothing. For Christy, however, she told me that she didn't sleep well. In fact, she tossed and turned all night. Moreover, she said that all of her dreams, she said she saw red, all around her. She even said that she woke up, or thought she woke up, and her room was filled with a deep red light. However, that was it. There was no nightmare or anything acutely scary that happened. Only the red and restless sleep. Christy and I were eager to connect with Carl via the Ouija that afternoon. We wanted to know if he had indeed came to us the previous night, and why I seemingly experienced nothing at all, and if he can explain the red colors that Christy saw. We sat down to the Ouija that afternoon. We connected with Carl again right away. We asked him if the red light that Christy saw in her room was indeed him, or was she simply imagining or dreaming. Carl said that indeed it was him, and he was there with Christy in the bedroom. He was the red light. We then turned to why Carl didn't visit me. As I said, I experienced nothing out of the ordinary that night. As a stupid kid, I was bummed. I wanted to be visited. Immediately to this question, Carl replied, "Tav." We both thought, who the hell is Tav or Teve? We asked Carl several times again, why didn't he visit me that night? Once again, his reply was only, Tav. When I say reply, I should note that those that are not familiar with the Ouija, basically the dial falls on a letter. It will spin around a board and attempt to form words. In this case, it keeps on repeating these 3 letters over and over and over again, in a pattern between these 3 letters, T-E-D. We didn't know what to make of it. Neither one of us knew who Teve or Tav was. Carl's reply made no sense to neither one of us. Regardless, we both needed to go home for dinner with our families. Fast forward to dinner with my family. My mother, father, and 3 brothers were all there. I was at the table with my brothers and dad, and my mom was wrapping up making dinner in the kitchen. At these times, we talked about normal things like school, how our day was, etc., etc. You know, family stuff. While talking, my mother very casually mentions to my older brother that he again left the TV on in his bedroom that night before. She scolded him as this was a normal occurrence. He would leave the TV on in his bedroom, and at oftentimes, my mother would need to get up to turn it off as it filled our bedroom hallway with both light and noise that would keep her awake. She reminded him that she was tired of having to do this, and that it disturbed her sleep. At that moment, my 9-year-old mind knew what Carl meant earlier that day in explaining why he never came to visit me. Indeed, my brother's TV that night was left on, and indeed, just as Carl said, this is why he did not come to visit. Perhaps he was afraid of the light. Perhaps it kept him away somehow. Regardless, to this day, I can't explain the correlation between these seemingly 2 separate details, one of what Carl said, And 2, what only made sense afterwards, my mom comment about my brother's TV needing to be turned off after awakening her. Perhaps you can. Either way, it still weirds me the hell out to this day. So when I was in high school, my friends and I were into really spooky shit that we had no business messing around with. We would visit cemeteries at night, go to our small town's local haunt spots, and try to stir up any urban legends. But the story I'm about to tell you made us quit cold turkey trying to seek out the paranormal. One night, we were over at a friend's century-old home. I mean, it was old and creaky, and the perfect setting for a night of Ouija. We brought it out, and for the first half hour, nothing insane happened. Just some movement from the planchette. Then, feeling smug, I asked the spirits what my middle name was. The thing is, my middle name is literally made up by my parents. It's not a real name. No one in the circle knew my name, yet alone knew how to spell my middle name. There was literally no way someone could even guess it, but the board knew. It spelled my middle name perfectly, and I can feel my heart fall into my gut. Keep in mind, my hands were not on the planchette, so I couldn't have moved it myself. Everyone laughed because what a silly middle name that would be, but I had to confess that it was mine, and the color drained from everyone's face. All of a sudden, a glass ashtray that was sitting a few feet away on a coffee table split clean in two, and we were done. We left the house to go stay somewhere else, and fortunately, I've never experienced anything that terrifying again. Good evening, everyone. This is Yuri K, and this is the end of the video. Please leave a comment and let us know your opinions on the matter. If you happen to like this content, please check out our other videos. Make sure you like and share amongst your friends and family to help our community grow. You happen to be new to this channel? Please make sure you subscribe. It's free and you can always change it in the future. You have some terrifying story suggestions? If so, make sure that you send it to my email, fearofthedarkstories@gmail.com, and I'll feature it in a future segment. But you guys stay safe out there, and remember to always be afraid of the dark.